All right. Good morning or good afternoon, I guess, from where you are. It's morning here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's 1 o'clock here. I think it's 11 a.m. there, so we're right across the divide. But yeah, good morning to you too, and so nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you as well. I have watched some of your videos. I don't, I'm not a good watcher, which is part of the reason why my videos are kind of short, because that's as long as I can stand to actually watch them, to review them. So yeah, so I hope you are doing well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. I watched your endless winter video earlier today, and it's around 5 minutes, and that's
Right.
the perfect time for it. Like I try to keep my game design videos to be around 5 minutes as well, if I can.
Right.
Yeah,
Because there's so many people doing these detailed videos.
yeah.
We don't have to do that. They can go watch those ones, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Well,
Yeah.
I have some questions written
Okay.
up. So I will be glancing at my iPad as
Okay.
we talk,
Great.
because I am more comfortable with an agenda versus just kind of coming up with stuff out of the air.
Yeah.
So my first question to you, as you probably know, or maybe not, my channel focuses basically on three things: heavy games, games of 3+ weight on BGG. It focuses on representation, right?
Yeah.
And then I always have the little sideline train thing going on, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm a huge fan of train games. I love them. Actually, too, in the teens, 20s, and 30s, a train job was the best job a black man could get.
In the
They
20s
could,
and 30s. Okay.
yeah, they couldn't. They were not permitted to be engineers, of course, but as far as being the maitre d' or doing the maintenance, and so I have a couple of uncles that worked on the train, so they're kind of special.
That is
So
incredible. Did they talk about that with you? Is that maybe part
sure.
of the origin of your interest in trains and train games?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
So
neat.
my question for you: what do you think the state of the hobby is right now, especially concerning heavy games?
Oh, in terms of heavy games. So I am more of a medium weight Euro gamer myself. But recently there have been some heavier games that have gotten to my table quite a bit. Because I think they've started to do something that I really appreciate in terms of accessibility, in that the action selection system in the game in certain games, Arc Nova is the one that's coming to mind for me right now. But I think Arc Nova, it has a very simple, streamlined action selection system, even though there's a lot of things to think about and that are going on. And that is super helpful for me as a medium weight gamer to get into those heavier games. And I'm seeing more and
Right,
more companies do that. Have you
right,
seen that?
right.
Yeah.
Well, it comes from Civilization New Dawn.
Yes.
That's the
Yeah.
first, big game. Because as BGG pointed out at the beginning of the year, there
Yeah.
were 5,000 games released in 2022. So we aren't going to pretend to know all of them,
Right.
right? So, yeah, absolutely. The action selection focuses you on just a few things, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you got rid of that and you could just do anything, it could be very overwhelming, and it could be very much analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah. And I like the way you said that, because I am, when I get into those heavier games, I'm often overloaded with so much information that I'm trying to remember. Like a lot of those heavier games ask you to remember a lot of things, and that's I struggle with that. And so I like when there's a streamlined element that lets me focus on a few different things. And even in Arc Nova, one of the things I love about that is if a card is in the 4 or 5 slot, even if as I'm learning the game or if I haven't played it in a few months, I'll just take that action because I know it's stronger than the weaker actions. I
Right,
don't really have to think
right.
about it all that much. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. We played it yesterday, and as
Oh, okay.
usual, I didn't get to a positive score. But
Oh,
I had a great time. I love that game. We have played it a ton. We'll continue to play it a ton.
nice.
So other than that, how do you see the state of the hobby, particularly from a publisher point of view?
Yeah. So yeah, I run a company called StoneMaier Games, as you know.
Right.
People probably know it if they see the shirt here. Um, but one thing that I've noticed in terms of the games that we've released over the last few years, so we've gone a little bit lighter than we did for a little while. So we released Libertalia Winds of Galecrest, which it's a 45-minute, hour-long game. It's definitely not above 3, I think, on the weight scale for Board Game Geek. And then we had Red Rising recently. I designed a little game called Smitten that's very, very light. And so these games have done well, but I have the sense that people have been waiting for something a little bit heavier, because I think, at least for my company, they were used to games like Viticulture and Euphoria and Wingspan and Tapestry, games that are
Scythe,
right around it.
baby.
Yeah. And
Scythe.
Scythe, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I designed this game Expeditions, the sequel to Scythe,
Oh,
that's
good.
around the same weight of Scythe, and that I'm
Good.
hoping will appeal to that. Is Scythe your favorite of our games?
Well, it's funny. I've only played Scythe once,
Okay.
and it wasn't that great.
Okay.
However, what I'm trying to arrange now is, I asked for a review copy because I don't own it, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to arrange a game with Before You Play because Naveen loves it. And
Uh-huh.
as you probably have experienced, most times when you play a game with someone who loves that game, you
Yeah.
get a completely different perspective, right? Than when you're
Yeah.
trying to learn it on your own, or maybe your group is kind of, I don't know, you know what I mean? But if
Yeah.
the person comes in, oh yeah, well, this is what you need to do,
Mhm.
to make it fun. They don't say it like that, but
Yeah.
they do, or I have found that players do describe it in a very positive way, and the choices that you're looking at, oh, well, you can do this too, and
Uh-huh.
that really enhances the experience. So if I get lucky and Naveen actually has time at the next con, or if they're even going to be there, then I hope to play it a couple times with him before my review.
I
So
appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
the other game, as you probably know, I'm a co-designer of Advanced Civilization.
Mhm.
So I bought Tapestry, except my friends hated it for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
So I sold it. However, a friend of mine, a Jackie Chow from Show Me How to
Oh, yeah.
Win,
Uh-huh.
yeah, she owns all the expansions. So
Yeah.
it's on the agenda for next week.
Oh, cool.
And
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So again, she really likes it. I'm hoping to be able to get a real feel for
Yeah.
how the game plays. Civ games seem to be all the rage in the last few months, right? We have Mosaic,
That's it.
which we've been playing and have been enjoying. It's not a short game though,
Yeah.
and then you've got, like you said, Arc Nova bringing over Civ.
Mhm.
New Dawn. You've got there's another Dominations has become
Yeah.
popular. It was all over Dice Tower,
Yeah.
so it feels like there's a Civ thing going on.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
yeah.
I have another question for you.
Okay.
What did you take away from the issue with first including Cortez and the viticulture game?
Yeah. So Viticulture World was an interesting experience for many different reasons.
Mhm.
Partially because with Viticulture World, when we were designing Viticulture World, I was the developer and publisher. I wasn't the designer, but I was involved in it quite a bit. We really wanted to go and kind of correct some mistakes from the past with viticulture to make it more inclusive in a couple different ways. And so, for example, with the red and blue cards in the game, I have some visuals here. So these are the blue cards included in Viticulture World, and I'll get to Cortez in a second. Don't worry, I won't avoid that question, but I do want to give some context here.
Sure.
So we tried to include. We had always had these mama and papa cards in Viticulture, which meant that there were only same-sex couples in the game. And I wanted to correct that.
Do you mean
yeah.
opposite sex couples?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, we always had opposite sex couples. Thank you for correcting me. And so we weren't including, as well as we should have, same-sex couples if people wanted that option. And so we reversed in the original game, the men were on the blue cards and the women were on the pink cards. And so in Viticulture World, we reversed them so that once you shuffle these in, you can have same-sex couples. And we also, one of the things that we did with the original Viticulture, or actually with Tuscany originally, but it was a Kickstarter campaign. And so
right.
I had backer art on the cards, which isn't great for representation, unfortunately, because it's just whoever signs up for it becomes the people on that art. And so I moved away from doing that type of custom art and instead we selected just a wide variety of ages and ethnicities. So there's like a much wider variety of people on these cards themselves. So I'm giving this context because we were trying really hard to make viticulture more inclusive, but we missed something big. I missed something big. And that was, there were two conquistadors who had a real life historical impact on the winemaking element of South America. But
big bet.
they were bad people. They're terrible people, right?
Right.
We shouldn't have, not that the game was celebrating them, but they were put into the game in roles where they were making a positive impact. And we included some information even in the game that says like, hey, we're not like condoning their actions. These aren't really good people, but they're still in the game. And Maggie from Thinker Themer was so courageous. I love that she stood up and told me as she was looking over a review copy that it wasn't the right decision. That was the wrong decision.
No,
and so,
no.
Yeah,
no,
I'm talking a lot here. Yeah, share your thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing was to provide context. Like you look at Puerto Rico, right? And of course, people are mad because the little brown cubes are slaves. However, in the setting of Puerto Rico, they were slaves, right? So we got the context right there because that's what they were. However, we failed to inform the player, well, by the way, you're playing with these slaves because we knew that was not going to fly, right?
Right.
And then we have Maracaibo, which is where Maggie is from, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we're going to go to the Caribbean and make money. Okay. So how are we making Mr. or Air Fister? Exactly what's going on down here.
Right.
So after, everything had happened, well, now he has context. Well, yes, we came down here to make money and they kicked our ass, right? So let's tell the entire story, right?
Right.
So, of course, eventually it didn't work out that way, but it was not as Maracaibo originally presented it. So, like I said, what did you take from this whole experience, including interacting with your reviewers?
Oh, that's a great question. And there are definitely a couple levels to it. One, with the reviewers, I typically don't watch reviews of our games because I want to stay as impartial as possible. Right. I want to be able to send you a review copy, knowing now that I know this. I know that you didn't have a good experience with Scythe and Tapestry, and I want you to review it honestly and not to feel like I'm going to be looking over your shoulder, watching the review and deciding if that will impact future reviews. Yeah.
I've been buying games for 40 years. So the fact it's free does not affect me whatsoever. And I think I've been in the hobby long enough to accept, well, okay, I think it's a messed up game. He likes it. It's all good, right? It's all good. Yeah. We're all entitled to our opinions. You are even entitled to make a bad game. It's okay.
I like that. Well, but one of the things, that this opened up is that I tried, even though I've made it kind of very public to reviewers that I don't watch their reviews, I still value their opinions. I still want to share them. And I added a thing to our newsletter. You may have seen this in the newsletter I sent you yesterday, the reviewer newsletter. At the very bottom, it says, I have an open door policy that if you play one of our games and you think I should know something, whatever that thing may be, I want you to tell me. I want you to feel comfortable telling me. And so that was the reviewer impact. It also made me realize with Maggie. So what we ended up doing is we printed a replacement card pack for Viticulture World, very last minute. Like we scrambled together to make this happen, and it was a good reminder to me that that we're going to make mistakes, but that we have the potential to fix them. And we don't, like originally when Maggie reached out to me, I said, you are right. This is wrong. What we did with the mistake that I made. And I don't know what to do about it at this point. Like the game is arriving at fulfillment centers in a few weeks. And Maggie pointed out, hey, like if you want to do something, you can actually do something. And she was right. And so we went back to the printer and we put together these replacement cards right away. So that was a good reminder to me that it's never too late to take action to fix something that was wrong.
Right. Exactly. I think there was concern in the kind of like my audience, the progressive board game audience, that you appear to ignore some advice regarding the conquistadors.
There's that. I think I saw some tweets to that effect. The truth of the matter is we did have a cultural consultant look over the game, and her advice for the conquistadors was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the advice was to not portray them in too positive of a light. Her advice was not to remove them from the game.
Okay.
And I think that was unfortunately not expressed all that much on social media. I think that the thing that was conveyed on social media was that we had a cultural consultant and that I ignored her advice. And that wasn't true. Like if she had said remove them from the game, I absolutely would have. However, I think the key is that the buck still stops with me. Like even if the cultural consultant said that, I should have realized that it was a mistake and removed them from the game well before we went to print. So that's on me. I can't put the blame on anybody else for that.
Right. Well, now I'm 65. And so when I came along, Cortez was this big hero, right? And so a lot of times when that's in the back of your brain, then you don't look at it from a true perspective. You're like, well, I was told the guy was awesome, so he must be awesome, right? And so a lot of times, and now I'm a person of color, but I also have to challenge those older beliefs. Okay. So it's not like, you have this brown skin and all of a sudden you just, oh yeah, I know everything. You know what I mean? Because, it's just like with gender, right? It's always he or she. Well, now I work very hard, and it's work to say they, this person, those folks, you know what I mean? And it takes work. And I don't know your age. I'm not asking it. However, you look to be, middle-aged, and maybe you were taught the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up in the era of Christopher Columbus being somewhat of a hero, and now we know that is not the case.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm the same to you. Yeah.
Oh. So we just have to watch ourselves. So my next question, why do you think representation is important?
So I mean, there are many different ways that I think it's important, but my goal at StoneMaier Games is to bring joy to tabletops worldwide. And the worldwide part of that, and the tabletops generically, is a huge part of me wanting to include anyone who wants to play a game. I want to find a way to include them at my table or at their table, include one of our games at their table. And that means everyone who wants to try playing a game and connecting over games, introverts, extroverts, old people, young people, people of different ethnicities, sexualities, everything. And so I think when you can look at a game and see someone like you playing that game, that can make a big difference. And I even recently, Klaus Tuber, the designer of Catan, passed away, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
And I was reflecting back on the impact that had on me. And it was one of the first games that I played as an adult. And I did that because there were other young professionals playing the game that invited me to the game. And so even though that's that's a very slim element of representation, when that happened, when I had that invitation to join someone to play that game, I realized, there are people my age still playing board games. Because I had associated board games with my youth, not with being 25 and playing games with other people. And that really opened it up to me. That I was like, oh, wow, there are people like me playing board games. I can do this now. And so I can only imagine how that must feel for people who maybe are a little bit more marginalized and less privileged, and trying to have that opportunity to feel welcome at a table.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
One other thing, though, related to that, we are seeing the rise of solo gaming and online gaming. So in BGA, you don't know the color. You don't
That's true.
know
Yeah.
if they're disabled. You don't even maybe know what their native language is, right? And then
Yeah.
solo, of course, is just you.
Right.
So do you see that having an impact on the issue of representation for board games? Or do you think that will always be a sideline?
That is an excellent observation and question. I hadn't thought about. I've written about like the benefits of digital games, but I hadn't thought about how what you just said, how you really don't know who you're playing against in a good way. I don't know. I do hope that opens the doors for people to feel more welcome at the table. I think the internet is also sometimes, unfortunately, full of toxicity. And so those two things, hopefully they don't end up going hand in hand in the end. But I think Board Game Arena does a pretty good job with, reporting someone if maybe they aren't.
Right. Well, they also get downgraded.
Yes. And you get that.
As,
yes, exactly.
as people that other people want to play with. Well, because of course, representation is wokeism, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and I was, actually that question came to me this morning as I was going over what I was going to discuss with you. And it's like, you don't really know. And I know the 18xx genre has grown hugely because of the online 18xx.games. Right. And then, the other thing is maybe people of color or marginalized people feel more comfortable on BGA or on, they don't, like if you're missing a hand and you walk into a meetup and everybody stares at you, that can be, you just get tired of it, right?
Yeah.
So on BGA, maybe you're working with maybe a controller or whatever, or a trackball, whatever you might have, and no one even knows.
Right.
So you do wonder if the marginalized community is going to start shifting that way and how that will affect StoneMaier Games.
Well, we're certainly, Board Game Arena and our digital implementations 5 years ago, it wasn't a priority at all. And now I really want that. I want that for all of our games. And you've just added a huge reason for me to continue to prioritize that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. So where do you see the hobby in 5 years? Do you see it, it has this monstrous growth, I would say, at the beginning of the 2010s, and it's boom. And then we have Kickstarter and crowdfunding and all of these other vehicles which are bringing games to the hobby, which we may not have ever even seen. So, I'm not a big Kickstarter fan though, but I certainly understand the impact of it on the hobby. So where do you see the hobby in 5 years, and where do you see StoneMaier Games in 5 years?
I hope we're still around in 5 years. I think we'll continue down our path of trying to only release a few new games every year and really spotlighting those games and supporting those games and the people who want to play them. I have a little theory, and I want to throw this out at you to see what you think. So I have found for campaign games in particular that I feel like right now I have a lot of campaign games that are going to show up at my door from crowdfunding and Kickstarter and pre-orders over the next year. And it makes me hesitant to buy more campaign games because I know I'm going to have a lot of time spent on these campaign games. So I'm curious what you think about that. Do you think are you playing campaign games? Do you think we'll see a lot fewer of them because of the time suck in the future? Yeah.
Well, I will say this much.
Yeah.
If you have a really interesting digital implementation of a campaign game, something like what Cole did with Oath, where you can continue it with different people. It feels like people are moving around more now.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
people that you were playing with 6 months ago, they've moved to another state or another city. And
Right.
so there goes your campaign. I know that Gloomhaven, it was, campaign, was #1 for so long. But there's a couple of things that I don't see discussed enough about, like the rankings.
Yeah.
Particular, those rankings happened in that moment. Do
Yeah.
you understand? So that 5, 6 years from now, would they still rank them the same? After we've come through a pandemic where they may not have been able to even play the campaign. And so people are kind of like, are we a little reluctant to spend $300 on Frosthaven if we
Right.
aren't a family already? I don't see a lot of activity in my meetups or at Dice Tower or at Strategicon here in Los Angeles with campaign games. I think, this is my opinion, you lose too much visibility.
That's interesting. You're right. Yeah, because you don't. I love that, because I think one of the ways that I market our games is I try to give people a reason to get them to the table. And you're never going to bring a campaign game to a convention or a meetup. That's one of the most visible times or game night. Yeah. You're going to bring the game that you can play once and close it up and play it again just the same in the future. Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah.
Okay, that's $50. No, I'm kidding. I will note that I do have a master's in business administration degree. And that's part of what makes me think of these different things
Yeah.
is, my emphasis was marketing, technology, and development. And
Okay.
so as a marketing person, I want my stuff where my potential customers can see it, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And that's
Right.
part of the reason too why the channel focuses on one game at a time, because BGG is my source of getting
Yeah.
people to the channel. The YouTube algorithm I'm too small for, but if I can get like I currently am, I'm featured on BGG on the front page if you scroll down.
Yeah.
And or if I can get my video a hot video, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about there, right?
Well, I know
And
you mentioned
so,
that in the last video that you hope for more likes on Board Game Geek rather than on YouTube.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so my advice would be, I would down the campaign games in
Yeah.
favor of, nice looking graphics, accessibility, as you talk about.
Yeah.
So, because like I said, I don't see them at all on
Yeah.
and also I think, campaign games came from role-playing games,
Right.
and they
Yeah.
may be going back to role-playing games.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah. When you
Yeah.
also mentioned solo games, I feel like I hear a lot of solo gamers
Yes.
talking about the campaign games they're playing, which is great. I love that they're having fun with them.
Right.
But it's a signal to me that maybe a campaign game that plays up to 5 players is probably never going to be played by the third, fourth, and fifth player, maybe 1 and 2.
Right.
Highly unlikely at those higher player counts.
Right. Right. So, I'm just kind of, thinking it through. But,
Yeah.
it's hard for me because I came up in the you play the game at the table with people era.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? I also have been video gaming since 1981. So that's my solo gaming. And so it's been very hard for
Yeah.
me to, sit down and take half an hour to set up Cloudspire, for example, and do it solo. It's just like, but I could be playing Anno 1800 right now. So, but I also understand a lot of people don't want to see screens when they come home.
That's
You
true. Yeah,
know?
I stare at a computer all day, so I usually want to
Right,
turn it off when I play games.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and also, frankly, I mean, I came into computing before ergonomics was a word. So I have permanent RSV in this hand.
Yeah.
You see, I'm wearing this glove. So my body would appreciate me doing more solo board gaming, I'm sure. Yeah. So let's see. I had one more question for you, and
Okay.
then we'll call it a day.
Okay.
How do you feel about the state of Tapestry?
The state of Tapestry. Yeah. It's interesting now to know that your group did not have a good experience with the game. Um, so I designed Tapestry because I wanted a civilization game that wasn't tied to real world people, history, or places. I wanted people to feel like they could create their own civilization and their own world. And with that goal, I think the game accomplishes that goal. I think
Yeah, is it
yeah,
too abstract though?
it does add quite a bit of abstraction to make that possible. That is true, and it adds a bit of zaniness too, and I enjoy that in the game. Like, you can develop your military all the way up, but you've completely forgotten, you've never learned how to write, or you've never learned those things. And to me, that's kind of fun. But I understand who people who are very passionate about history, that might not connect with them. And there's also the well-known kind of balance issues with the game, that once you know the game pretty
Right,
well, there's certain civilizations that are just more powerful than others. And so right
right.
now, actually, after I get off this call, we're working on rebalancing those civilizations
Yeah,
for a pact. So yeah,
but I want to just make a little suggestion for you
yeah,
with that. Be honest about it so
yeah,
that I can bring in a brand new player, even though we've played 10 times. Well, this one is easier. See, that was
yeah,
one of the advantages of a dance civ. Everybody isn't equal. Okay,
right,
so if I have a new player, play Babylon or Assyria. If I
yeah,
have a serious player, play Crete. And as long as you point it out, you
yeah.
don't pretend like everything is equal. See, for me at least, that's when I get irritated. Is like, oh, wait a minute, this is completely OP. But
Right.
if you say, hey, this is completely OP.
I like that. I like that. And
Yeah,
that's something we're adding actually on the revised civilizations. We're adding a complexity rating.
right.
We're trying to
Yeah,
balance them, but trying to add that complexity. And I will say, as a designer, I as the designer of Tapestry, it's really hard for me to pick the complexity rating. I've had to ask other people what they think about that because
right.
I'm too
Of
close to
course.
it to do that. Yeah.
Right, right. And then, I suppose now, do you go to meetups where you don't know anyone?
Not all that often. Most of my gaming is within a couple of different groups of friends, and then one convention here in St. Louis. Oh, but I do
You
play test with a lot of people who are outside of my bubble, outside of my circle. But going to actual meetups, I probably don't do that enough. I should probably get that in my
if
routine.
you
Yeah,
I'm not telling you how to run your life, of course, but I think it would be good for you to see how people who aren't playtesting, who don't know you, maybe someone
yeah,
might know. I mean, out here we're gonna know you, but I don't know what kind of meetups you might have, and then just to see what are people playing right now. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And because BGG, as we know, is always weighted toward people who will click.
Right,
But there's a
right,
lot of gamers out there who never click.
right.
And so you might
Yeah.
want to see some of those from time to time. I know I'm
Yeah.
just sitting there bossing you around like
I think it's excellent advice. I think yeah. I would say maybe I get a little taste of it on Instagram because I do follow a lot
oh,
of just random people on Instagram who are talking about the
good,
games they're
good.
playing. But even
I
that is probably curated to a certain amount. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be bossy or
It's
anything
good
like
advice.
that.
I think it's really good advice. Yeah, COVID has gotten me kind of out of that and I need to get back into it. So I'm glad you said
Right,
it.
right. So, like I
Yeah.
said, you are a respected member of the hobby. And I just come up with some ideas. Well, why can't we do this? Or why
Yeah.
do we want to do that? Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your
And
time.
yes, and I really I'm hoping for a positive site experience and a positive tapestry experience. Okay.
I hope so too. And if not, I respect your opinion to not like it.
Well,
Either way.
if not, it's going to be either it's got to be this is not a game for me.
Yeah.
There are games that I play that I think are fundamentally mal designed. Okay,
Yeah.
I can't imagine Scythe with as much popularity as it has as having that issue, because people would have picked it up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jamey, I do hope you have a good day. And
Same.
thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So great to meet you and have a great day.
Yeah. And okay, so Jamey just cut it from there.